So you have seen that in C++, to declare a variable, we need to specify its type. That's why we say C++ is a statically typed language, meaning when declaring a variable, we need to specify its type, and this type cannot change throughout the lifetime of our program. Other examples of statically typed languages are C#, Java, TypeScript, and so on. In contrast to statically typed languages, we have dynamically typed languages like Python, JavaScript, and Ruby. In these languages, we don't have to give our variables a particular type. The type will be determined based on the value that we assign to these variables. And that type can change throughout the lifetime of our program. Okay? So that is the difference between statically and dynamically typed languages. Now, in C++, we have a bunch of different built-in data types. So far, you have only seen int and double, but we have more built-in types that we're going to cover in this section. In this lesson, I'm going to give you a basic overview of these types, but as we go through this section, you'll become more familiar with these types. So for storing whole numbers, we have int, which takes 4 bytes of memory on most systems. This is not a hard and fast rule. Depending on the implementation, the number of bytes taken by an integer can vary from one system to another. But for the most part, you can assume that an integer takes 4 bytes of memory. In 4 bytes, we can store numbers from -2 billion to +2 billion. Now, if you want to store a smaller number, we don't need to waste 4 bytes of memory, so we can use the short type, which takes 2 bytes of memory. And in 2 bytes, we can store the values from -32,000 to +32,000. Now, for storing larger numbers, we have long, which is often the same as int on most systems, and long, which takes 8 bytes of memory and allows us to store really large numbers. Speaking of experience, most of the time you would be using short or int types unless you're working on programs that involve complicated mathematical computations. Now, for numbers with decimal places, which we call floating point numbers, we have double, which you have seen so far. The double type takes 8 bytes of memory. Now we also have float, which takes 4 bytes of memory, and long double, which takes 8 bytes of memory as well. Again, most of the time you would be using double, especially for storing monetary values, because the float type can result in loss of accuracy. Now we also have the bool type for storing true and false values. They're often used to represent a condition like, is this person eligible for a loan or not? We also have another built-in type called char for storing single characters. So that was a basic overview of the fundamental data types in C++. Again, as we go through this section, we'll explore these types in more detail.